The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
Hi, I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Dr. Dan Brennan, pediatrician and physician in Santa Barbara, specifically Sansum Pediatrics. Dan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm really excited too to be able to share your story, both as a pediatrician and a leader in our community, but I know the viewers who are watching are thinking, I know this person. Either it's because their children see you as their physician, or perhaps your articles in the News Hawk, or perhaps on the Little League field, of which we're going to talk about all of those aspects. Right. And one of the goals we have for this show too, Dan, is to talk about the career pathway a person has taken, because it really, all different professions start in all different sorts of ways. So with that in mind, I want to start at the very beginning with you. Tell us where you were born and where you were raised, where you went to school.
Yeah, so I am a Santa Barbara native. Mm-hmm. I was born in Santa Barbara. We lived here for the first year. My parents, both teachers. My dad was finishing up his postdoc at UCSB. He got his first job in Orange County, so we moved down there for a while, and he was commuting to different places in Orange County, LA, and then when a job opened up at Santa Barbara City College, he took it, and we all moved back up to Santa Barbara. So I finished up elementary school at Elwood School in Goleta Valley Junior High, and then 4 really awesome years at San Marcos High School.
At San Marcos High School, fantastic. And I'm curious, because I want to talk about this a little bit more later in the program, but were you involved in athletics?
I was, yeah. I played soccer and I played tennis in high school, and
okay.
those were my big high school sports.
High school sports. Any other extracurricular activities before we move away from your elementary and junior high school years?
You know, I tried to always be involved in a lot of different things, mm-hmm. but I think probably the sports were the thing that took the majority of my time outside of school.
Got it. And so where did you go to college, and what did you major in?
Yeah, so I'm a proud UCLA Bruin.
Mm-hmm.
I went down to UCLA for my undergrad education. I was a biochemistry major, did a lot of the science, and then I also didn't have enough to get a minor, but I did a lot of history, and poli-sci was another interest in college too. So those were my focuses, along with some research in the chemistry department and intramural sports, and going to just about every UCLA ball game I could.
Which is super fun to do.
It's really fun.
That's great. And so you really spent those years up to that point in California, and I understand you left California, and tell our viewers where you went and why.
Yeah, so I went to med school. I got an awesome opportunity at Albany Medical College, which is in upstate New York. My dad's family is all from the East Coast. I had an uncle that lives up in Saugerties, which is just down the Hudson River, and it was a great time for me to go try out a different part of the country, get to know some family that I didn't know very well. And it was a good experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, something I forgot to ask you earlier is wondering if you had any siblings. Do you have any siblings?
I do, yeah. I have a brother, Rob, who's 3 years younger than me. He's a local dentist. He's an endodontist, if you need root canal. Hopefully you don't.
Thank you for letting me know. Appreciate that.
And I have a sister. We have a sister who is Sarah. She's about 13 years younger than us. Our parents empty nested before we were out of the house. And so, so she is actually a pediatric hospitalist at Children's Hospital of Orange County.
Wow, medicine definitely runs through the Brennan family for sure. And I mentioned family, or it reminded me of family, because you talked about going to New York for medical school. I understand that school in Albany is the 3rd oldest in the history of the United States in terms of medical schools. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a really cool school with a lot of tradition. It's part of Union University, and I didn't know much about this area, but for people who live in that area, it has quite a rich academic tradition. And was neat. There's actually a lot of California kids that were there, so I felt right at home.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I was going to ask that. What was the culture shock like when you went from being the UCLA Bruin to going to New York and the East Coast?
Yeah, so I think the weather definitely was, the shock, the cold winters. We were mostly inside the library, so it didn't affect us too much unless we had to get out at 4 a.m. to scrape off the car and get ready for early morning rounds. But I think about 20% of my class, I think, was from California or UC school. So I think we made T-shirts or something that said UC Albany, which
That's pretty
was
funny.
kind of our
That's
inside
cute.
California joke.
I like that. So how did you get back to California?
Good question. It took a lot of work.
Did it?
There was a lot of investment and time trying to make good connections in California. I had some really awesome mentors along the way. Some folks in Albany, and then some local doctors here who took an interest in my education and really tried to help me make good connections back here. So I was able to get my residency in pediatrics at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, which is it was a phenomenal experience, and that just opened up so many doors for me.
And Dan, in terms of your schooling, so I'm going to assume at UCLA you were there for 4 years, but for medical school and the residency, how many years did that take?
It's a good question. So medical school was 4 years. It's 2 years sort of in the classroom, and then it's 2 years really kind of on the floors and learning, the different rotations and seeing patients. And then pediatric residency is 1 year of what they call internship, and then 2 years of residency. And so that's to get to be a general pediatrician. If you want to specialize beyond that, become a cardiologist or endocrinologist, then it would be an additional few years beyond that.
Okay. I have so many questions, but I want to continue the trajectory back to Santa Barbara then, so we can close that loop. So how did you get to Santa Barbara?
Good question. Okay, so my wife is also from Santa Barbara. We were trying to get back here because we thought this would be a really great place to live and raise our family someday. So along the way, I had the opportunity to come back and do a rotation my last residency year in Santa Barbara at Sansum Clinic. And so my pediatrician growing up, Dr. Klendrianos, had kept in touch with me all the way through college, med school, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
And so he invited me in for a month to work there, and I must have done the right things because they offered me a spot. Larry Mansbach, who recently passed away, was a longtime fixture in the community, great pediatrician, and he really, I think, paved the way for me to be able to take over his practice, and so I owe a lot to those two guys.
Wow, that's great. So let's go back just a little bit, and can you identify the moment or time or year when you decided you wanted to be a doctor and specifically a pediatrician?
So my grandparents, my grandfather specifically, was always very interested in his grandkids' futures. So he sort of worked with each of his grandkids to try and find something that he thought that they would do well in. And so for whatever reason, he thought, hey, you'd be a great doctor. And so he didn't really choose my field, but he just said, I think you should really consider this. I think that's why my brother and sister also kind of wound up in similar fields as well. The choice to be a pediatrician was really more something that happened when I was in Albany, and it was I enjoyed the rotation. They were long days, but I came home and I felt more energy than when I had left in the morning, and that really was a good sign. There's another local pediatrician, Dave Medina, who had been in practice for a really long time in Santa Barbara. He also kept track of me and took good care of me. And he told me once, he said, you'll know what you want to do when you're in a room with a group of doctors and you just click with them. And it was obvious, that was really the only thing that was going to really fulfill me and make me happy. So that's what I did.
That's what you did. Yeah. It really calls to me the impact of somebody who kind of shares, what would you think about, sort of like your grandfather did. Didn't choose it for you, but kind of put an idea in. Yeah. And also, I love what you said about finishing the day and having energy at the end of the day. I think that's just a sign of something that you feel good about. Hard work, really challenging, but when you, at the end of the day, feel energized, something's right. Yeah. So that's really great. I love that. So let's talk about Sansum Pediatrics.
Yeah.
Give us paint a picture of it for us. If we haven't been there, or if we don't have you as a doctor or physician for our children, what is it like there? And you've been there for 18 years.
Yeah, I've been there for 18 years. That's really hard to believe.
Yeah.
So, I love it. I think that's where I will hopefully finish my career. We recently had a remodel of the building, so most of the building is pediatric driven. It's a fun atmosphere. There's 8 great pediatricians there. We have also a great nurse practitioner.
Yes.
And we work as a team. We all have our own practice of patients, but if one of us isn't available, someone else is willing to pitch in, and I really think everybody there is fantastic.
Phenomenal
so I'm
team.
lucky to have a good team.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And is there such thing as a normal, typical day? And if there isn't, can you make it up for us so that we know what?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. What would be part of a routine or a normal day for you?
Yeah, it's like a snowflake. There's no 2 days that are like. So the things in common are the time I get to work and the fact that I'm seeing patients. But you never know what you're going to walk in at the next room. You never know what the next message is on your voicemail or in your inbox and things. So it's a team effort. It's not something I could get through unless I had a good partnership with my medical assistant or nurse, supervisors, my partners. There's just a lot of multitasking. Just a lot of things that come our way constantly. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably my best skill at this point, is being able to do more than one thing at a time.
Yeah. And over the 18 years, would you say that some things have stayed the same and some things have changed dramatically? Is that a fair statement? And what would you say have been a constant or has remained a constant, and what are some of the things that have changed so dramatically?
Yeah, so just having awesome patients has been the constant, and that's what keeps me doing what I do. Is I love the families, I love the patients, I love watching the kids grow and hit their milestones and reach their goals. And now I've been there 18 years. I've had some kids that started with me when they were born, and they're graduated off to college, and that's just an amazing thing to track.
Literally from 0 or 1 day all the way to 18. That's incredible.
Yeah. Even a few people who started off, older in the practice who are now coming back with their kids, which is also kind of a great thing and also a weird thing because I don't feel that old.
Right.
To have a second generation.
We stay the same, Dan. It's just the children that grow up.
Exactly. But a lot has changed, like you said. Thinking back on it, I think I barely had interaction with a computer when I started. I think, within the first weeks, we were just all getting a computer in our, in each of our offices that had, your very crude schedule on it that you could see, and everything that we dictated afterwards was done over the phone, or some people might have even been using a little dictaphone or something at that point. Now everything is done electronically, so every exam room has a computer, our offices have a computer, and everything is done through the computer. So it's good and bad. There's definitely some positives. When you can share medical information quickly, it's awesome. I have a family that lived part-time in Ohio and part-time in Santa Barbara, and they had come in to see me sort of on an emergent basis. And it turned out that something had happened when they were in Cleveland, but they didn't know how to get me the records. And I said, well, where were you? And they said, Cleveland Clinic. So I typed in Cleveland Clinic, up popped all their records, labs, notes. So within literally 30 seconds, I had everything I needed to kind of continue on the conversation. So that was incredible.
Yes.
The downside is probably a universal feeling, is just the amount of time that you have to spend sort of feeding the computer data. It wants information, more information.
Right.
We're sort of responsible for doing all of the transcription now on our own, whereas before we had someone else, on the other end of a phone that was doing that for us. So that's definitely been a transition. So with the technology, I think there's probably positives and negatives.
Sure.
And it's probably a net positive, but I think it's still definitely a work in progress.
Absolutely. Boy, what a shift in 18 years for sure. And some of our viewers watching today might be thinking, wow, I really want to be what Dr. Brennan is right now. I want to be a pediatrician or a physician or study in the way that you did. And if you can imagine some high school students watching today, what would you say are some of the skill sets that they would definitely need to hone and just continue to have discipline in, or even a mindset in, to be a really successful pediatrician, physician?
Yeah. I think the number one thing is just being dedicated to what you do and just really having work ethic, not being afraid of putting in hard hours and really pursuing, sometimes not taking no for an answer, but just deciding like this is what I'm going to do and just really pushing. Communication's probably a big one too. I think to be able to communicate with the people who are going to give you entrance into a school is a really big deal, because you could have all the grades you want, but if you can't interact in a good way with the people you're interviewing, then you won't get past that process. And then just to make it all the way through to a place where you're, sitting in a room with somebody who has something they need to talk about, and being able to sit and be a good listener, and then trying to communicate. I think that's probably, the biggest skill. Especially, I'm a pretty shy person, so that's something sometimes not the easiest thing for me to do. And I think just embracing technology, like I had mentioned, really there's a lot that goes on. And I think that as I look at my Dr. K, for example, who's been practicing since 1971, I can't imagine what the transformation has been like over the last 47 years for him, 48 years for him to see all the changes with the technology. And God bless him, he keeps up with all of it just like the rest of us. I don't know that I'll be able to do that if I'm still doing this at the end, but it's I think those are probably the main things.
Yeah, thanks. That's really, really key. Hard work, determination, perseverance, I know you're talking about, and communication. Having that one-to-one communication, but also articulating what you're trying to say, and be succinct about that as well, and then keeping up with that technology. Great advice. Clearly, we know why you have been named Santa Barbara County Pediatrician of the Year. You have had so many accolades and awards. How does that make you feel? What are some of the awards, can you say, so that I don't get them wrong, and how did it make you feel?
I just have the best group of patients, and they're just so supportive of me. So I think probably the one that means the most was Santa Barbara County Physician of the Year that I was nominated by my peers. And it came right after really trying to focus on helping to build our community vaccine levels, and maybe that's something we can talk about later. But there's been, a couple of the local publications will put things together, and I think that's probably more about, whose patients like to sit at the computer and type in names and things like that. But it's an honor and something that is special to me, makes me feel like I'm appreciated. So.
Definitely, and you are appreciated, and clearly those that you serve, the families you serve, want to tell other people about how great you are. But in terms of the Santa Barbara County Physician of the Year by your own peers, that does mean, and your colleagues, says so much about you and them and the relationship you have. Something you said that we do want to talk about has to do with the vaccination. Strive for 95 is really the big header, I should say, or title that it had. Tell us what that means and what the aim is and why. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. So, Strive for 95 was an idea that I came up with probably 2013 and 14, and we were definitely seeing a trend at that point of more and more families questioning whether or not they should vaccinate their kids. And so there was always this fear that, if our vaccine levels got too low, that we would wind up with things like measles, or at the time it was whooping cough pertussis in the community that we were worried about. And so it came to a point where there was actually a baby that was under a month of age, was not one of my patients, too young to get his or her vaccines, that contracted pertussis and wound up passing. And it was just the most awful thing. And I had taken care of a couple of patients at Cedars-Sinai that had similar things, and it was just a real dramatic, left an impression on me. And so we tried to figure out how can we get the message out about the importance of having strong, high levels of community vaccination rates. And so after doing some research, figured out that 95% is sort of the cutoff, that if you're below 95%, then you increase the chances of a vaccine-preventable disease like measles getting into your community and sort of spreading around. So to be clear, it's 95% of the community.
Of the community, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you're 95% or above, statistically, there's less chance that one of those diseases, arrives in the community, and there's less chance that it spreads around. So there's some people who are too young to get their vaccines. There's some people who are medically fragile and they can't get vaccines, or the immune systems don't work well. Somebody might be on chemotherapy or have an organ transplant or have another disease where their immune system doesn't work well. Somebody might be not able to get vaccines for some reason or another. And so there's a percentage of people that's going to come off that 100% right off the top.
Sure.
And so, we're left with just a really, thin margin of people that if they choose not to vaccinate, that it brings us down below 95%. So strive for 95 kind of rhymed, and I like to rhyme things. And so sort of pitched this idea to a couple of people and pitched it to Sansum Clinic and to Cottage Health. Over there, Steve Barkley was really my partner in trying to get things going. Your predecessor, Bill Cerrone at the Santa Barbara County of Education office was super supportive. And so we just kind of went around town and we got the public health department on board, and we really put together sort of a strong public service announcement, came up with a website that really put a lot of this information out there. And I think really the community embraced the importance of it. And I think there was also some things that happened subsequent to that. There was a measles outbreak at Disneyland. There was some legislation in Sacramento that required vaccines to be given. And even with all of that, I think just the community felt stronger afterwards. And we went from 2013, kindergarten entry in Santa Barbara County, I think, was around 92%. And when I just looked up recently in 2018 data, it was like 96 plus. And so for whatever reason, it seems like we're in a better place. And so we're hoping that message doesn't get lost, especially with some outbreaks that we have currently up and down California, and then across the country. People have probably seen that in the news. So we're still trying to keep up our efforts and hopefully ramp that up again a little bit.
That's exciting for sure. I have to say, I really appreciated hearing the genesis of it. How did it start? And I love that it started with you and it rhymed, so you thought, okay, but it was also a really important topic and area to address in the community. But, and so what I'm hearing you say is that it's been a successful campaign. It's actually really influenced the community, but we don't want to let down from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Something else that I think is anyone who knows you would say is important to you is your family.
Yes.
Let's have you say a little bit about your family and the grade levels of your boys.
Yeah. So my wife Elle and I have been married for 20 years. We knew each other, before we were off in college, but we didn't really, meet until we were both in college. So that's a fun story. I was homesteading for my medical entrance exams, and I was spring break from UCLA, and I was out at UCSB studying. It was just too nice. It was spring break, and I just said, heck with this. I can't study anymore. And I walked outside, and we sort of recognized each other and, talked on the corner there for a couple hours.
How fun.
That was
so
cool.
For spring break, you were studying at the library. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That was my intention. I don't know how far I got.
Okay,
but I got into med school, so it ended up.
There you go.
Before. And I wound up marrying that girl. It wound up working out well.
That's a very sweet story. So 20 years.
So 20 years we're married. My oldest son is Josh. He's 15, and he's a 9th grader, freshman at DP High School. Loving it there.
Great.
Just really good experience.
Your rival high school from when you were younger, right? But now
it's tough. But he plays multiple sports, and I have the hats and all the gear and stuff. So it's
good.
tough. But you got to root for your friend and his teammates. So
that's right.
There's no question there. So sorry, Abe Jahadmi.
Well, it's just I can cheer for UCLA because you went, but it wasn't the school I attended. But we can get past that.
But you're wearing blue.
That's right.
Our second son is Andy. He's 12. He's a 6th grader at Mountain View Elementary, and our youngest is Maddie. He's 8 and in 3rd grade also at Mountain View.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
3 boys.
3 boys. So let me ask you this. I want to transition to baseball for a minute because I get the opportunity to see you out at the Little League fields. It's very fun for me as a parent, but you have a different role there. So we'll talk about the role. But do your boys play? Do all 3 boys play?
They do. Yeah. All 3 boys started when they were 4 or 5 out at DP Little League, which is where I played when I was a kid. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah.
And Josh is still playing in high school. He's got a game this afternoon.
Oh, fun.
The other boys are playing ball too.
So for the viewers who don't know, Dan, you're the president of the DP Little League, right?
Yeah.
And you've been president for 3 years?
Yeah, this is finishing up my 3rd year.
Wow. And is it true that everyone in those leadership positions are all volunteers?
Yes, it is a 100% all volunteer organization, which is incredible when you kind of see pull behind the curtain and see all the work that goes into it.
All the work that goes in. Well, so talk about some of the work that goes in as the president of DP Little League.
Yeah. There's a lot of different things. The biggest one is really just kind of learning all of the rules as being part of an international organization. There's a real thick rule book, and it takes some time to really learn it. So I had been on the board, this is probably my 11th year overall, so I've had a lot of different roles. I've worn a lot of different hats there, and so over time you kind of pick them up. But I learn something new literally every single day, and so that's fun. It's fun to learn that. It's recruiting coaches, managers, umpires. Really, it's just finding good people to play parts in the organization. So it's not a one-person job at all. I mean, it really is a whole group of about 20 board members, and then all of the other people that help support them. Without all those amazing, board members, volunteers, it doesn't come off. So, I try and come up with some big ideas and try and help figure out how to pay for them and help with some fundraising and stuff. But
well, we in the community appreciate it, and it's clearly a system and an organization made up of incredible people. Just like you were talking about your team at the office, the team on the field is just as incredible. It sounds like.
Yeah, I'm super fortunate, and that's our second family. I mean, that really is our community, is that group of people that's there for the majority of the year.
For sure. And Dan, a moment ago you talked about big ideas, so I just want to spend a few moments on the big ideas you share in NewsHawk. You share it with so many people who read. The NewsHawk has asked you to participate and provide some articles. How do you come up with some of the articles that you share and write?
Oh, it's a good idea. So I've enjoyed writing for a long time. One of my favorite high school teachers, Mr. Frainer, was probably the person who influenced me to pursue that. So thank you, Mr. Frainer.
Thank you, Mr. Frainer. Incredible teacher.
Really, yeah. So I started a couple different columns over the years, and just recently started with the NewsHawk one, which I love. So it's called Your Hometown Doc. It is less pediatric focused than some of the other ones I've done, although I definitely like to include topics about kids and families. It's what I call health and fitness with a splash of Santa Barbara and a dose of dad humor, which my kids don't appreciate my jokes, so I try. And I try and just pay attention to what are people talking about in the office, what are families asking me, what do I hear people out at the baseball fields talking about. What are some new things that I experienced that might be fun for somebody else to know about and try? And so as those topics come up, I try and spend a little bit of time talking to people and thinking about it. And literally, like, I wake up in the morning and the whole thing is sort of written in my head, and I'll just kind of sit down and type it out. And it's kind of a neat process. It's pretty cathartic, actually.
Oh, that's great. Well, we appreciate that. I read every one of them.
Oh,
I hope
you're
our
too kind.
viewers read them too, because you're so relatable. They're topics that we're thinking about. We talked about social media for teens. You've written about mindfulness. I mean, you're talking about some dad components, as you said, and definitely relatable to the Santa Barbara community. We really thank you for that leadership, and it's important that we hear from our hometown doc for sure.
Thank you.
Dan, I can't believe our time has actually come to an end here. It goes so fast. It's because of the interesting aspects of your career. We really appreciate not only the fact that you're a Santa Barbara County Physician of the Year, but truly so relatable. You share so much with so many people in the office, out on the field, and in the media too. We really appreciate your impact and your leadership. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You do so much for the community too that I can't thank you enough for everything that you do for our kids.
Oh, thank you. I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools. Thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Education Matters.